Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video. In this video, I'll be talking about who I would cast on a season of Survivor South Africa All-Stars. So, at the time that I initially conceived this video, Survivor South Africa was actually on hiatus. And there were some rumors going around that the plan for Season 8 was going to be an All-Star season. But in the last week, actually, Survivor South Africa officially got renewed, and they did open applications. So, really, it's not looking like Season 8 is going to be an All-Star season. But for this video, we're just going to assume that it is. So for this video, obviously, I will be going through each of the seasons and talking about who I would cast on a season of Survivor South Africa All-Stars. I was pretty easily able to narrow down the cast to around 24. I did eventually narrow it down to 20. And there were some pretty big cuts here, in my opinion. There were some people that I wanted to see play again that didn't make the cut. But again, this is an all-star season. A season that, in my opinion, should have the best of Survivor South Africa. So unlike my other casting videos where I picked who I think production would pick, here, this is purely my choice. Overall, these are the people who I personally would like to see on an all-star season. So let's start off with Season 1. So for Survivor South Africa Panama, there were a couple people that I really considered but didn't end up picking. Nico is someone that is one of the best characters probably in all of Survivor South Africa, definitely from Season 1. I mean, he's essentially like the Shane Powers of Survivor South Africa, but with that, he's also a terrible player. I mean, he's not a good player of the game. He literally got voted out twice on that season. Also, he's just someone that you can't find anything about. Like, I tried to look him up on social media and all that stuff. You can't find anything about him. So, because of all those reasons, I decided to not put him on the cast. Also, really considered Jacinda the runner-up of that season, as she is someone that's a bit more easy to find on social media. I think it would be interesting to see how she plays now that she's much older and now like a mother and all that stuff. She originally played when I believe she was like 25, but really she was not great TV. So while she made my initial cut of 24, she didn't really make it down to the top 20. Now, I did end up putting Gareth on the cast, and for me, it was really tough between him and MZ, and it really came down to who was more prevalent on social media. That's really what it came down to for me. Where MZ, I mean, all I was able to find was his LinkedIn, while with Gareth, I was able to find a bit more about him, see some current pictures. That, and also, I feel like Gareth was a better player, obviously. I think Gareth was the best player of that season. I think he wins that season if it wasn't for Dead Man's Island. And I think if he does win that season, he's one of the most dominant winners in international Survivor history. While MZ was probably a better character, I will give him that, but not as strong of a player. Obviously, he was voted out twice. Mind you, MZ does win if he gets to the end, and was a really likable presence, but I went with Gareth over him. Though, to be fair, I do think Gareth is very similar to another player we'll be talking about later, but screw it. I personally like Gareth more as a player, so I put him on the cast. And the other person from Season 1 that I put on the cast was Vanessa, the original winner of Survivor South Africa. Now, I don't think she's the most entertaining player in the world. I mean, she's not completely boring, but she was someone that I really considered cutting. But at the end of the day, she is the first winner. I mean, she's the first winner of the show. I feel like it's kind of weird to have an all-star season without the first winner of the show. Then again, Australian Survivor's doing that. But either way, for my personal cast, I would have Vanessa on the cast, even though she isn't the most entertaining person in the world. Now, from Season 2, Survivor South Africa Malaysia, there were a lot of contenders, but not many of them made the cut. I mean, I did consider people like Hein, who's essentially like the Rupert of Survivor South Africa. I mean, he's someone who had no semblance on strategy, but was a somewhat likable presence, and also was very good at the survival aspect of the game. And he's actually, to this point, the only person to ever be brought back for another season, as he was a reward on Season 3 of Survivor South Africa, which is so weird. But by the time this season eventually happens, it'll be over 10 years since that point, and Hein was already old at that point. So I feel like at this point for All-Star season, I don't feel like we particularly need him. I did also consider people like Manla. I think Manla was a really fun presence on that season, someone that got really screwed over by the Final Four format, where I think he more than likely wins if he gets to the end. I mean, unless he gives up the win to Lorette, which I could see him doing. But again, like, you can't really find anything about him online, so I decided to just leave him off. I left off Angie for a similar reason as well. I think Angie was one of the bigger characters that season. But again, she's not very active in the community at all. I think considering the season was already 12 years ago, I feel like it's kind of tough to bring back a lot of people from these seasons, so I left her off as well. I left off Grant, who was probably the best player of that season. Again, it's been 12 years. You can't find anything about him online. And also, he just wasn't really that entertaining. He's kind of just fine on the show. So he did make the initial cut of 24. Same thing of Angie, but both of them just got cut. I also didn't put Lorette on the cast, who was obviously the winner. Again, I just never found her to be that entertaining on the show. So the only person from season 2 that I did put on the cast was Amanda. And Amanda was the third place player on the season. She was someone that I thought was a pretty fun personality on the season. Someone that was an underdog from the merge on. Someone that is still prevalent in the Survivor South Africa community. She still talks about the show. She was involved in Battle of the Bush recently, which was a US versus South Africa charity event. I just feel like all the cards are there for her to be a returning player, so I did put her on the cast. Now from Survivor South Africa Santa Carolina, we have almost no one, to be honest. I mean, really, the only two people that I even considered were the two people that made the cast. I mean, I didn't consider like Gigi. I didn't really consider people like Okert or anyone. Like, there's really just not many people to even consider here. The people I did put on the cast, I did put Sade. She was a fun enough personality. She's also still prevalent. She had a lot of screen time. Now the question is, can you get her back? I don't know. But I ended up putting her on the cast anyway. And the other person is kind of in a similar situation, and that is Ashley Hayden, where I think Ashley Hayden is the biggest lock on the board if she wants to come back. I think Ashley Hayden is someone that is probably one of the best players of Survivor South Africa ever, and also someone that's very loved by production. I mean, LaRue Botha really talked really highly of Ashley, but even he mentioned how he doesn't know if they can get her back anyway. So again, not entirely sure if she would come back if there was an all-star season, but I do feel like there's no way they're not going to try to get her back, and on an ideal Survivor South Africa all-star cast, she definitely makes the cut. Now from Survivor South Africa Maldives, I considered a few people that didn't end up making the cut here. I did consider Harry, who was someone that I think was a fun enough personality on his first season. Something that's really weird is I found out that he's currently the Scrabble champion of South Africa. Like, a really strange thing there, but he didn't make the cut. I didn't put Let's Go or Bonnie on the cast. They were pretty close to making it on. To be fair, I wouldn't have minded either of them making it on the cast, but there just simply wasn't a spot for them. I also considered Allison as well. I believe Allison had one of the bigger edits of that season, if not the biggest edit. But again, like, I just felt like she was kind of too similar to certain other people. And with the casting pool this tight, it just, she didn't make the cut. But the people I did put on the cast, I did put Roxy. I believe is the only pre-merge boot on the list here. But again, she was just such a fun personality on that season. I was definitely rooting for her on that season. She was someone that was very active in her gameplay. Again, she was kind of screwed over by multiple things. The fact that celebs versus plebs thing gave the celebs a disadvantage from the begin with. And with both of her allies leaving the game outside of a vote, with one quitting and the other one getting medevaced, I mean, she was kind of just screwed over, really. And she did play Idol successfully at one point, but she really wasn't given the opportunity. I felt like she had so much potential. So if I were to give any pre-merge boot another shot, it would be Roxy. And I feel like she also has the same sort of storyline that Jacinda would have had if I put her on the cast, where, again, she was I believe 24-year-old when she first played, where now she's like a married mother and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it would be interesting to see how she's changed. I believe she also still comments on the current season of Survivor South Africa, so I feel like a return from her is pretty likely. I also put Tejan on the cast. I thought Tejan was probably my favorite character of the season. I think he was definitely the most active player of that season. He was a pretty big Survivor fan. I mean, I just feel like there's almost no reason to not bring him back. I think he's one of the biggest locks for me. He was also involved in the Battle of the Bush charity event that occurred recently, which I think that's a pretty clear indicator that he would go ahead and play again. So for me, I think Tejan's a pretty big lock on the board. And if you're having Tejan back, why not bring back his rival as well? I decided to bring back Heike as well. And Heike's another one that I don't think they can get back. I would be very surprised if Heike wants to play again. But again, this is my cast, so I put Heike on the cast. And to be fair, I never particularly liked Heike that much on the show. But I do think this storyline of the Taejon-Heike rivalry and having that on another season would be a pretty fun dynamic. And he is a winner, so really any excuse to have a winner on the cast is a pretty good one in my opinion. So I did put Heike on the cast. Now for Survivor South Africa Champions, which this was a very tough cut here. I mean, I love this cast. I think this is a fantastic cast overall with a lot of really fun characters. And in the initial cut of 24, there were actually 5 people from this cast. But I decided to stick to my rule that I do with Survivor US as well, and that is only 4 people per cast. And that's the way it is with seasons 5, 6, and 7 here. I considered Boulay, who is the runner-up of the season, but she's another one that just simply didn't make the cut. I mean, she wasn't that great at TV to begin with anyway, so she wasn't making the cut. I consider Shona another one of the pre-merge boots. The thing is about Shona, though, I don't think she has as much potential as Roxy. I mean, Shona is one of those people that was involved in the Battle of the Bush as well, and I think she would be a very fun returnee. But I do think Roxy has more potential than her in the game. I also consider David. I think David was a very, very fun character on that season. But at the end of the day, I mean, he's not someone that I feel like I need to see play again, even though, again, I wouldn't be unhappy if he did. So the people that I did put on the cast, I did put Marion on the cast. I think Marion's one of the bigger locks on the board. Again, someone still very much into the Survivor South Africa community, who's a big super fan, massive character, probably the biggest female villain in the history of the show. Really, I think there's no way you do an all-star season without Marion. And similarly, I think the same thing of Shane. I think Shane would be a pretty big lock for me. Now, Shane is a pretty tough one to find on social media nowadays. I mean, I don't really see him talking about Survivor South Africa or anything. But it hasn't been that long since the season, about 5 years. So I would be surprised if they couldn't at least contact him. And I feel like, again, I feel like he wouldn't turn it down based on what I know about him. So I would love to see Shane back. Another lock on the board for me was Xavion. I feel like there's no way you can do an all-star season without Xavion. I did feel like Xavion and Gareth were very, very similar sort of archetype-wise, where they were these sort of big, strong, like sort of pretty boy sort of guys that tried to dominate their alliances, where I feel like Gareth was successful, Xavion wasn't as successful with that. But I feel like they're very similar archetype-wise, but I said screw it. Put both of them on, why not? I think Xavion's the bigger lock on the board, though. I think Xavion is someone that, again, I would be very surprised if he wasn't on. He's still someone that comments on Survivor South Africa, the current seasons. And yeah, he was just such a big character that first time, was a big player. Someone that could have won the game if he didn't get idled out at the final 5. I think he's someone that I would like to see play again. Now for the final spot, it was very tough. It was between Sivu and Graham, and I did go with Graham. And I love Sivu. I think Sivu's a really fun character. I would love to see Sivu play again. But I felt like I would rather see Graham. Again, Graham is obviously the winner of the season. He's one of the best players in Survivor South Africa history, in my opinion. And I feel like to see him clash with someone like a Rob or an Ashley Hayden, I feel like that would be a very interesting thing to see over someone like Sivu. Despite, again, I really like Sivu, but I do think Graham is the more interesting choice here, even though, again, Graham's not the best TV character in the world, especially over Sivu, who I do think is a bit more fun, but I did end up going with Graham. Now, from Survivor South Africa Philippines, this was tough. Again, like with these last 2 seasons here, these were both really tough because I love both of these casts, but again, I tried to keep it to 4. And I also tried to keep it to 2 males, 2 females, just to keep it fair there. So the people that got cut, I didn't put Ace or Tevin on the cast. I really wanted to put them on, but again, didn't really have room for them. I really wanted to put PK on the cast. PK was someone that I thought would make the cut. But again, there's just 2 big locks here. And PK just isn't as big of a lock as those 2 other guys. And because that he ends up getting left out. But again, I could very likely see him being on a real all-star season. But for the people that made the cut, again, for the guys, we have Tom, the winner of the season. I think a lock. I think no way they do an all-star season without Tom. One of the biggest characters of that season. One of the most ridiculous winners in the show's history. I mean, he was even at the Survivor South Africa Island of Secrets reunion and was mentioned there. I just feel like he's still in the good graces of production. No way he's not on the cast. And similarly, I think Werner is also going to be on the cast. He was also at the reunion. He wasn't mentioned, but he was at least at the reunion. I think he's someone that's, again, very well liked by production. Rubotha really talked about his love of Werner. So, I mean, I just really don't see how he's not on the cast. Again, he's one of the best players in Survivor South Africa history. He's easily a lock for me. Now, for the women, the biggest lock there is Palesa. I think Palesa is definitely going to be on the All-Stars. I think there's no way she's not on All-Stars. It would be very surprising. Obviously, fan favorite character. Really strong player, though, again, has her faults, but someone I would definitely like to see play again. And the last spot was a bit tough. It was between Tony and Jean for me. And I went with Tony. I think Tony has more storylines for a return. I think her rivalry with Werner would be very fun to see on a returning season. I also think she's a bit more of a spastic sort of personality, where Jean, I feel like, is more calm and collected for a lot of it. I feel like Tony is more likely to get into arguments, and for that reason, I did put Tony on the cast over Jean. Now for Survivor South Africa, Island of Secrets, the final cast to talk about. There were a lot of people I considered here. I mean, I considered Doral. I think he would be fun on a return. Didn't make the cut. Dante didn't make the cut. Mike didn't make the cut. Jeffrey didn't make the cut. Steffi would have been a very fun returnee, but again, just didn't make the cut. Tanya would even be a fun returnee. Overall, I mean, there were a lot of people that I would like to see play again from this cast, but for me, the 4 to come back were pretty easy to pick. I mean, I think it was like right away, I knew which 4 they were going to be. So first person is Sipe. Sipe was a fan favorite sort of character, kind of similar to Palesa in my opinion, where they were a very likable, strategic female player. I do think obviously Sipe has her faults, but she was pretty fun TV, and for me, she would make the cast on an All-Star season. I also put Nicole on the cast. I think Nicole is, again, a pretty big lock for me. I mean, she was the runner-up of that season, probably the second best player of that season. Had a very interesting style of gameplay, was a really fun character. Like, overall, there's no reason to not have Nicole on that cast. I also put Jacques on the cast. I think Jacques is another one. Very big character, very fun player, someone that's going to play very hard while he's there. I just feel like, again, no reason to not have Jacques on the cast. And the final person is very obvious. It's Rob. Again, the winner of that season, probably the best player in Survivor South Africa history. One of the best players in Survivor history as a whole. No reason to not have Rob on the cast, as I believe he said himself that he would play again. So, again, there's no reason to not have him there. So there we go. That is my entire cast of Survivor South Africa. So to recap, from Survivor South Africa Panama, I have Gareth and I have Vanessa. From Survivor South Africa Malaysia, I have Amanda. From Survivor South Africa Santa Carolina, I have Sade and Ashley. From Survivor South Africa Maldives, I have Roxy, I have Tajan, and I have Heike. From Survivor South Africa Champions, I have Marion, I have Shane, I have Xavion, and I have Graham. From Survivor South Africa Philippines, I have Palesa, I have Tony, I have Werner, and I have Tom. And from Survivor South Africa Island of Secrets, I have Sipe, I have Jacques, I have Nicole, and I have Rob. So that is my cast for Survivor South Africa. All-Stars. Again, who knows if it'll ever happen, but it would be a really fun thing to have happen. As I feel like Survivor South Africa's had one of the weirdest histories out of any of these international series. So to see that culminate in an All-Star season would be a really fun thing to happen. But again, I'm just not sure it ever will. But I could definitely see that being the plan at some point. As again, LaRue Botha in his interviews was talking about how he has something really big planned for season 8. Nico himself has talked about how he really wants to do an all-star season. I do think now is the right time for it. It's just, again, will the stars align for it to eventually get greenlit? Who knows? But that's the video. That is my cast for Survivor South Africa All-Stars. Thank you for watching.